Sonny catches Ethan and Cassius, and this secret could blow Port Charles wide open. Sonny may not just discover a secret here. He may walk straight into a trap, see Ethan standing beside Cassius, hear the wrong half of the right conversation, and snap before anybody has time to breathe. And honestly, I think that is the most dangerous version of this story. Because this is not about Ethan sneaking back into Port Charles for some emotional, personal, I had nowhere else to go reason. Nah, that feels too clean, too easy. Too daytime drama on the surface. In my opinion, Ethan's return has another layer under it. And that layer has Cullum's fingerprints all over it. Not in a loud way. Not in a villain standing in the shadows way. More like a quiet infection spreading through the city while everyone is looking in the wrong direction. This is just my interpretation, and I could be wrong, but I feel like Ethan is not moving like a man who came back by accident. He is moving like someone with instructions. Someone who knows where to stand, what to say, what not to say, and who to meet when nobody is supposed to be watching. And that is where Cassius comes in. That secret meeting between Ethan and Cassius. I do not buy it as a random conversation. Not for a second. I think it is part of something bigger, something uglier, something designed to slide right under Sonny's nose and make him look foolish in his own territory. And if there's one thing Sonny Corinthus cannot stand, it is being made to look like he has lost control of his own damn house. The whole thing feels like a setup built around silence. Ethan does not come in shouting. Cassius does not walk around waving a flag for Cullum. They meet in corners, behind closed doors, in those little gaps where Port Charles always becomes dangerous. A back room, a hallway, a pier at the wrong hour, somewhere that feels normal until one sentence drops and suddenly the whole air changes. I can picture it so clearly. Ethan is tense, but trying not to show it. Cassius is calmer, maybe too calm. That is the thing with guys like Cassius in a soap story. They do not have to yell to feel dangerous. They just stand there like they already know how the night ends. Ethan says something like, "Cullum said we wait." Cassius answers, "Cullum doesn't wait. He positions." And boom. That is the kind of sentence Sonny hears from around the corner. Not the full story, not the explanation, just enough to light the match. Because Sonny does not need the whole puzzle before he reacts. That is part of his flaw, and also part of why people fear him. He feels betrayal before he proves it. He reads the room fast, sometimes too fast, and if he sees Ethan and Cassius together, whispering about Cullum, that is not just suspicious. That is personal. I think Sonny's anger would hit Ethan first, and not because Ethan is the most dangerous person in that room. Cassius may be the bigger threat. Cassius may be the sharper operator, but Ethan has a different kind of damage attached to him. Ethan is familiar enough to feel like a betrayal. That matters. A stranger can threaten Sonny, and Sonny deals with it like business. Cold, strategic, measured, mostly. But someone with connections to people Sonny knows, someone who walks into Port Charles with a face that does not immediately scream enemy, that kind of betrayal gets under Sonny's skin. It makes him feel played, used, like the city itself had a mask on and he missed it. And Sonny does not like missing things. So in that first explosive moment, I think he goes for Ethan. Not with some polished speech, not with a calm interrogation. No, he grabs him. Collar, jacket, whatever he can get his hands on. Slams him back. Maybe against a wall, maybe into a table, and Ethan, trying to keep cool, makes the worst possible choice. He does not explain fast enough. That silence would drive Sonny insane. Because to Sonny, silence is not neutral. Silence is protection. Silence means Ethan is choosing Cullum over the truth, choosing the mission over Port Charles, choosing Cassius over whatever trust he once had access to. And I feel like Sonny would look at Ethan and see every hidden threat at once. Not just one man. A network. A leak. A planted piece. A guy who may have been standing close enough to gather information, close enough to report movement, close enough to help Cullum map out Sonny's life. That is the psychological hit. It is not Ethan lied. It is Ethan was inside the walls. That is a different level of rage. And then Cassius, because he is probably not stupid, would know exactly how to twist the knife. He would not rush in and beg Sonny to stop. He would not panic. He might even smile a little. That smug, low-key, you are finally catching up kind of smile that makes a man like Sonny want to break furniture. Cassius could say something half true, half poisonous, like, "You think Ethan is the problem? Man, you do not even know how many people Cullum has around you." Now that line right there, that would change the whole temperature of the scene. Because suddenly Sonny is not just mad, he is afraid, even if he would never call it that. Sonny's fear often wears a suit of anger. He hears that Cullum may have more people close to him, and his mind would go straight to his family, his business, his inner circle. Who else has been watched? Who else has been feeding information? Who smiled at him yesterday while carrying Cullum's message in their pocket? That is when the story stops being about Ethan's secret and becomes about Sonny's entire world being compromised. In my opinion, this is where the soap opera tension gets really juicy. Not because of a simple fight, but because Sonny would start questioning everybody after this. And once Sonny starts questioning everybody, Port Charles gets messy. Real messy. Like, nobody can have coffee and peace messy. Ethan would probably try to explain, but I do not think he would tell the whole truth. Not right away. He may say he had no choice. He may say Cullum has leverage. He may say he is working an angle, that he is not really loyal to Cullum, that there is more going on than Sonny understands. And maybe that is true. That is the fun part. I do not think Ethan has to be purely bad for this to work. Actually, I think the story becomes better if Ethan is trapped somewhere in the middle. Maybe Cullum owns something over him. Maybe Ethan joined the operation to protect someone. Maybe he thought he could play double agent and got in over his head. Maybe he told himself he was controlling the situation and now Sonny has ripped the curtain down at the worst possible moment. That would be very Ethan, honestly. A little reckless, a little too confident, thinking he can dance between monsters and not get burned. But Sonny would not care about nuance in the first 5 minutes. That is the problem. He would not be in the mood for, "Let me explain." He would be in the mood for, "Tell me who sent you and how far this goes." Cassius, meanwhile, would become the colder target. After Ethan gets the emotional blast, Cassius gets the strategic one. Sonny would see Cassius as the face of the threat, the person who maybe recruited Ethan, maybe handled him, maybe delivered Cullum's orders, and Cassius would not crumble under pressure. I think he would lean into it. That is what makes him dangerous. He would understand that Sonny's temper is a weapon, but also a weakness. Cassius might bait him. Slow voice, little smirk, a line that sounds casual but lands like a brick. "You always thought Port Charles was yours. That is cute." Oh, Sonny would hate that. Hate it. Because Cassius would not just be threatening him physically. He would be attacking the myth of Sonny Corinthos. The idea that Sonny knows everything, controls everything, protects what is his. Cassius would be saying, without saying it outright, "Your kingdom has holes in it." And that is the kind of insult Sonny cannot let slide. Still, I think the most interesting part is not the punch, or the shove, or the immediate chaos. The most interesting part is what happens after. Because once Sonny sees Ethan as Cullum's possible man, the damage is already done. Even if Ethan later proves he had a reason, even if he claims he was trying to stop Cullum from the inside, Sonny may not be able to fully trust him again. Trust, in Sonny's world, is not a light switch. It does not flip back on because someone gives a sad speech. And Ethan would feel that. He would know that whatever mission he thought he was running has now become personal. Sonny is not just chasing Cullum anymore. Sonny is chasing the question of who made him look weak. That is dangerous for Ethan. Very dangerous. I could see Ethan trying to warn Sonny that reacting too hard is exactly what Cullum wants. That is another angle I really like. What if Cullum expected Sonny to find out? What if Ethan and Cassius meeting in that risky spot was not a mistake? What if Sonny catching them is part of the design? That would be nasty. And smart. Because if Cullum knows Sonny's temper, then he knows how to trigger him. Let Sonny overhear just enough. Let him attack Ethan. Let Cassius provoke him. Then suddenly Sonny looks unstable, impulsive, maybe even reckless in front of the wrong witness. Maybe someone records it. Maybe someone walks in at the exact wrong time. Maybe Sonny's enemies use the attack to make him look like the threat, not Cullum. That is classic soap chess. Messy, dramatic, a little wild, but it works. And honestly, I feel like this story needs that level of reversal. Because if Ethan is simply exposed and Sonny simply wins, that is too flat. The better version is Sonny thinking he caught the snake, only to realize the snake wanted to be seen. That would send the whole thing sideways. Picture this. Sonny has Ethan pinned. Cassius is bleeding but laughing. And then Cassius says something like, "Cullum said you would do this." That one sentence would freeze the room. Because now Sonny has to ask himself whether he is acting on instinct or following a script written by his enemy. That is humiliating. And for Sonny, humiliation is gasoline. Then Ethan, maybe desperate, finally breaks enough to say, "You don't get it. I was trying to keep him away from you." But Sonny does not believe him. Not yet. He looks at Ethan and says, "You brought him to my door." That is the emotional core right there. Ethan may claim he was protecting people, but from Sonny's viewpoint, Ethan brought Cullum's operation into the heart of Port Charles. Ethan made the city vulnerable. Ethan stood next to Cassius and spoke in code instead of coming clean. And in Sonny's world, intent matters less when the people he loves could get hurt. I think this discovery could also isolate Sonny. He might start pushing people away, refusing advice, snapping at anyone who tells him to slow down. Carly, Jason, whoever is close enough to challenge him, they could see that Sonny is not just angry. He is spiraling into suspicion, and the more he suspects, the more Cullum wins. That is what makes this prediction interesting to me. Cullum may not need to beat Sonny in a direct war. He just needs Sonny to distrust his own people. That is the real infiltration. Not guns, not money, information, doubt, paranoia, half-heard sentences in dark corners. That is how you take a man like Sonny apart without ever stepping into the room yourself. And Cassius would know it. Ethan may be conflicted, but Cassius feels like someone who understands the game. He might let Sonny hit him just to prove a point. He might take the punch and smile through blood because he knows Sonny has already crossed a line. That is nasty work, but soap villains and shadow players love that stuff. Now, where does Ethan land after all this? I think he becomes the wild card. Sonny may treat him like an enemy, Cassius may treat him like property, and Cullum may treat him like a disposable piece. That leaves Ethan squeezed from every side. And that is when Ethan might make his real choice. Not before, not in the secret meeting, not when he is playing spy games, but after Sonny attacks him, after Cassius exposes too much, after Cullum's plan starts closing around him, Ethan may finally realize he cannot keep one foot in both worlds. He has to betray somebody. That is the soap opera engine right there. A man who has lied too long finally forced to tell the truth at the worst possible time. In my opinion, Sonny's attack on Ethan and Cassius would not end the mystery. It would open the next chapter. Sonny would think he has uncovered Cullum's network, but really he has only found one doorway. Behind it, more names, more secrets. Maybe someone closer than Ethan. Maybe someone Sonny would never suspect. And that would be the punch after the punch. Because Cassius's warning, "You do not know how many people are around you," would sit in Sonny's head like a curse. Every glance becomes suspicious, every delay becomes a betrayal. Every person entering the room might be another Cullum plant. And Sonny, being Sonny, may start breaking things before he knows what he is actually breaking. That is why I think Ethan's hidden mission could become one of the more explosive turns in this whole arc. Not because Ethan is suddenly the biggest villain in Port Charles, but because his secret gives Sonny a reason to lose control. And when Sonny loses control, everybody pays. Even people who had nothing to do with it. So, no, I do not think Ethan is back for a simple personal reason. I think he is carrying a secret that could put him directly in Sonny's line of fire. I think Cassius is there to make sure that secret detonates at the worst possible moment. And I think Cullum, whether present or not, may be the one moving the pieces from a distance. This is just my interpretation, and I could be wrong, but the vibe I get is simple. Sonny does not stumble onto Ethan and Cassius by accident. He stumbles onto the edge of a much larger operation. And once he realizes Ethan may be part of Cullum's machine, man, Port Charles better duck.